Any woman wouldn't want you to find this video, not because it's harmful, but because it reveals truths that quietly shift the balance in relationships. These truths aren't malicious. They simply shine light on behaviors that often go unnoticed. When I first shared the idea for this video with a few women, some friends, others, former partners, each one urged me not to go through with it, not out of fear or anger, but because they sensed that what you're about to hear could change how you interpret the silent patterns of attraction and emotional connection. This isn't about blame, and it's not a tactic for control. It's a mirror offering men a chance to reflect on the dynamics they may have felt, but never fully understood, because behind every unanswered message, behind the warmth that fades without warning, and behind those emotional shifts that leave you questioning your worth, there are deputed psychological instincts at play in today's video. We'll explore the invisible strategies that often shape a woman's emotional world. Strategies grounded in protection, emotional learning and self-deprivation, from the power of strategic silence to the subtle use of emotional mirroring, to the quiet formation of inner hierarchies. These are not tricks. They are survival tools shaped by experience and culture. If you've ever felt confused, doubted yourself, or wondered why emotional connection sometimes feels like a puzzle, you were never given the pieces tooth. This video will bring clarity. So stay with me until the end, because what you learn today may not only shift how you see the women in your life, it may also shift how you see yourself. Number 1, the power of strategic silencing. The quiet moments between a woman's words lies a landscape. Few men are taught to understand when a woman withdraws into silence, not out of disinterest, but intentional reflection. It's not the end of emotional connection. It's often the beginning of deeper psychological evaluation. Her silence isn't empty, it's filled with observation, subtle in its force, deliberate in its timing. While he may interpret it as distance, she's not disappearing, she's watching, listening, registering every flicker of response. Women are often raised in cultures that teach them to interpret, more than confront, to listen, more than interrupt. Over time, silence becomes not a sign of passivity, but a quiet form of power. A pause during a disagreement isn't just the absence of argument. It's a space where a man's character often reveals itself without instruction. In that quiet, he's left with himself and in his reactions. Whether defensive, calm, or uncertain, she learns more than words could ever convey when she doesn't reply to a message, delays after a vulnerable confession, or stays still during tension. It's not passive behavior. It's an active gathering of emotional information. The tone of his second message, the urgency of his follow-up, the clarity or confusion, his emotions all become signals. She reads with precision through this. She begins to see his attachment style, his comfort with uncertainty, and his need for reassurance. In her silence, his insecurities surface in her stillness. Any need for control becomes visible. This behavior isn't always calculated. Much of it is instinctive, shaped by generations of experience, where silence was often the only way to be heard. Silence unsettles, not because it's cruel, but because it breaks a familiar rhythm. Men often feel compelled to fix, explain, or persuade. They rush to fill the space with apologies, justifications, or confessions, unaware that she's not seeking words, but truth. And truth often emerges when there's no script to hide behind. A woman doesn't always need a verbal explanation to understand what a man feels. She observes how he handles tension, whether he grows louder or quieter, whether his gaze pardons or softens. She listens to the silence between his words. That space tells her who he becomes when he's unsure, vulnerable, or briefly out of control. For many men, this silent pause feels unbearable. They experience it as a test, and in some ways, it is but not a trap or punish. It's a test of emotional steadiness, whether used deliberately or unconsciously. A woman's silence gives her clarity. It allows her to see how a man carries himself in uncertainty, not just what he says under pressure. Silence, then, isn't a wall. It's a mirror dot. It reflects back his self-worth, his confidence, and his emotional grounding. And in that reflection, she learns what kind of foundation lies beneath the surface. The men who understand this don't rush to fill the space. They don't perform, they remain calm, self-assured, comfortable in the unknown. These men signal something rare, emotional maturity without dependency. The most powerful communication between a man and a woman doesn't always happen through words. That happens in restraint, in the breath between thoughts, in the calm presence that values patience over performance. A woman may not always express exactly what she wants, but she is always noticing whether a man can carry the weight of what she leaves unsaid. Number 2, the mysterious art of emotional mirroring. There's a subtle form of social intelligence at play in many emotionally charged conversations between a man and a woman, something fluid yet intentional, intuitive yet strategic. It doesn't reveal itself loudly. Instead, it appears in the rhythm of her responses, the tone of her voice, and the emotional atmosphere she creates around each interaction. This is emotional mirroring, not merely a sign of empathy, but a kind of emotional choreography. A woman instinctively attunes herself to the energy of the moment and reflects it with quiet precision, unlike clear expressions of interest or rejection. Emotional mirroring reveals itself in layers. A woman sitting across from a confident, driven man may become animated, her tone lively, her expressions bright, matching his passion with enthusiasm. Moments later in a conversation with someone quieter and more thoughtful, her voice may soften her pace, slow her gestures, more composed. This shift is rarely random. It's a socially refined skill, one that builds connection while also quietly collecting insight. Emotional mirroring serves 2 subtle purposes. First, it builds rapport when a woman matches a man's emotional tone, and it creates a sense of alignment, a feeling that they just get each other. This harmony lowers his defenses. He begins to open up more unaware that the comfort he feels is in part being gently cultivated. Second, while that connection is forming, a quiet evaluation is underway. The way a man responds to emotional shift. He leads or follows the tone, whether he grounds the moment or is swept up in it. Offers her insight. She begins to sense his emotional awareness, his need for validation, and how stable or reactive his presence is. This isn't about manipulation, it's about adaptation. Emotional mirroring is how many women navigate emotional safety and explore relational potential without having to risk direct vulnerability in environments where openness can be misunderstood or misused. Mirroring becomes a protective tool. It allows for connection and observation without immediate commitment. The mirrored tone often says, "I understand." Without yet deciding, it creates space for a man's truth to surface, so she can determine whether it's something she respects, trusts, or feels drawn to for the man. Unaware of this dynamic, the experience can feel deeply magnetic. He may sense intimacy, even compatibility, but may not fully grasp how that closeness was created. If he mistakes emotional alignment for emotional investment, he may assume connection equals commitment. But a woman's ability to reflect what he offers doesn't always mean she's emotionally moved by it. It may simply mean she's observing it more closely in a culture where surface-level signals are often mistaken for true connection. Emotional mirroring stands apart. It's not the laugh at a joke or the lean into a conversation that reveals emotional depth, fits the way a woman fluidly navigates between warmth and restraint, openness and observation, all while maintaining an inner awareness of the man's patterns. If he reacts too quickly, she notes impulsive. If he withdraws, she senses insecurity. But if he remains steady as her tone shifts, she begins to trust his emotional grounding. His psychological dance explains why some women seem to form instant connections with many, yet commit to only a few. Their emotional language is fluent, but their trust is selective to understand. A woman's emotional mirroring is to understand not just how she connects, but how she decides what she moves toward, what she resists, and what she ultimately respects. Mirroring then becomes both an invitation and an investigation, a quiet signal of presence and a subtle test to see if presence is returned. Number 3, the secret ranking system. There exists an internal sorting process, quiet, instinctive, and rarely spoken aloud. It doesn't unfold through logic alone, but through emotions patterns and the subconscious need for emotional safety. A woman's interactions are often guided by an internal hierarchy, an evolving mental ranking of men shaped by experience, attraction, disappointment, and trust. This isn't about emotional economist. It's a way to invest wisely, protect her heart, and recognize patterns. Early at the top of this unspoken scale are the men who earn both her respect and desire. They're not always the most conventionally attractive or the wealthiest. Instead, they embody emotional strength, self-respect, and calm consistency. These men don't seek constant approval. They don't bend to be liked. They hold it value quietly but firmly, and in their presence, something shifts. She may find herself responding faster to their messages, seeking their opinion, introducing them to friends without hesitation. She may not consciously know why, but her behavior reveals the truth. He ranks highest beneath them are the men who offer charm, reveals more about his needs than his intentions. What appears as aloofness may simply be in protection. What feels like hesitation may be her way of asking. Silently, can I trust this moment to hold what I feel? When viewed through this lens, emotional caution is not a wall. It's a language. It expresses that closeness means something and should be approached with presence. Not pressure. The key is not to bypass this boundary, but to understand it. To see that patience, steady communication, and emotional maturity are not just qualities she hopes for there, the tests she listens for. For many women, boundary setting isn't about strategy, fun, or distraction. She enjoys their presence, laughs at their jokes, and may even seek their company during stress or boredom. But something's missing. They offer moments, not meaning she may respond quickly at times, but disappear just as easily. She might share stories, but rarely reveals the vulnerabilities behind them. They are familiar, even appreciated, but not deeply desired. Further down are the ones she keeps around out of politeness or passivity, while are accommodating, available, eager to please. But the spark is absent. She neither seeks them out nor avoids them. Often they are forgotten until they reappear. And for them, no dramatic ending is needed. Indifference alone lets them fade. At the very bottom are the ones she instinctively distances herself from. Perhaps they've pushed too hard, ignored boundaries, or simply made her feel uneasy. Their presence becomes a weight. Every interaction, it feels like a negotiation, not a connection. She avoids, delays, or deflects, not to be unkind, but to protect her emotional space. Importantly, this ranking isn't fixed. A man who once inspired warmth can fall if he begins to chase, over-explain, or disrespect her boundaries. Meanwhile, a quiet, steady presence may arise in her attention through self-respect rather than performance. Each interaction becomes a small test. Does he bring clarity or confusion? Does she feel more like herself or less? Can he recognize the difference between tolerance and true affection? This inner system isn't driven by vanity, but by vigilance. She's been shaped by moments where she gave too much too soon, where she trusted words not backed by action, where kindness was mistaken for genuine intention. So now she scans differently for consistency, for depth, for the ability to hold space without trying to control or escape discomfort. These aren't grand gestures, they're subtle cues, and she ranks them silently but decisively to misunderstand. This is to mistake politeness for interest, or to assume that proximity equals priority. But a woman's behaviour is rarely random if she hesitates to introduce a man to her world. If her replies shorten, if her gaze doesn't linger, it's not always a game. It's a quiet reshuffling, and that shift isn't a judgment on his worth, but a reflection of how she feels in his presence. The insight here isn't a game that system, but to understand that it exists and that every moment matters. Because once a man begins living from a grounded sense of emotional worth, without forcing connection, without seeking rescue, without needing constant validation, he rises in ways that require no explanation in a woman's world. The men she truly respects never need to ask where they stand. Her actions tell the story. Number 4, the psychology of emotional boundaries and intimacy across cultures. Female emotional expression, particularly around intimacy, has not only they've been experienced but shaped over time by culture, tradition, and generational influence. What results from this long conditioning isn't simply a behaviour. It's a deeply embedded system of emotional self-protection, one that often operates beneath conscious awareness. For men trying to understand what sometimes feels like contradiction in a woman's response to attraction. This system isn't a puzzle to solve. It's a social truth to recognise from adolescence. Many women are taught, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, that their emotional and romantic attention holds value. That attention from others is a resource to manage, not indulge. The result is a kind of reflexive caution. Even when sincere feelings are present, she may hold herself back. Not because the desire isn't real, but because in her world, vulnerability often carries risk. Attraction becomes intertwined with judgment. Openness is filtered through safety, and emotional exposure is carefully measured. She may slow things down, delay emotional or physical closeness, or introduce quiet challenges. Not to manipulate, but to observe. She's watching. Does he grow frustrated or stay steady? Does he respond to emotional boundaries with impatience? These responses give her insight, often more than direct questions ever could. At its core, this kind of boundary setting isn't about withholding, it's about preserving self-respect and emotional safety. She may be gauging, will her openness be met with care and with control? Will her emotional investment be honoured or overlooked? A man who remains consistent in the face of distance shows strength. A man who rushes for closeness without understanding her pace often, it's a response to a world that often misreads their choices more than it respects their feelings for men. Recognizing this isn't about frustration, it's about empathy. Sometimes a delayed yes is simply another way of asking, will you still stay if I don't rush to give it right away? Number 5, the subtle psychology of male competition. The delicate space of romantic connection where intentions are often quiet and emotions rarely stated outright. A unique tension arises when more than one man directs attention toward a single woman. This tension is rarely accidental, whether consciously or not. Some women learn over time how male energy shifts in the presence of competition. She may not say anything, she doesn't need to. A simple glance from another man, a mention of attention received, can change the atmosphere instantly. Suddenly, the men around her stand a little taller, speak with more certainty, and try a little harder. This is not manip instinct. Men wired by social and evolutionary cues often shift into performance mode when they feel they are not alone in their interest, and often without realizing it. A man finds himself investing more, not from desire alone, but from the perceived scarcity of her attention. He thinks if others want her, she must be worth more than. I initially realized that the urgency grows not because of connection, but because of comparison. And while many women do not deliberately orchestrate this, they are often aware of its effect by not hiding the fact that others admire her. By simply allowing that energy to remain visible, she may be reinforcing a quiet truth. Men rarely compete for what they do not value the danger. However, is when that pressure drives a man to measure himself not by his own values, but against imagined rivals, he begins to overcompensate to try harder than necessary. Not always from confidence, but from fear of losing before anything has even started. And in that space, something subtle begins to erode. Real connection is replaced by strategy. Desire becomes tangled with competition, and the man may lose sight of his own clarity. This dynamic doesn't need to be demonized. Not every woman leverages it. Not every man responds to it, but it exists quietly, shaping early dynamics in many romantic situations. The key for men is not to resist it with resentment, but to recognize when it's happening and why. When you feel your desire increasing, ask yourself, is this because of genuine connection or because I feel the pressure to win? That moment of self-awareness is powerful because clarity always trumps urgency. Final thoughts. By now, it's easy to see why many women might feel uneasy about this video, not because it reveals blameworthy behaviour, but because it uncovers dynamics they've often had to develop for survival. These aren't just individual quirks or isolated choices. They are shaped by culture experience and emotional self-protection. Silence, mirroring, emotional pacing, selective closeness. The subtle effects of competition. These are not weapons. They're responses to a world that asks women to navigate love while guarding vulnerability, that expects openness but punishes it, that values emotional strength but rarely provides safety for it. For men, understanding these patterns isn't about gaming the system. It's about choosing clarity over confusion, strength over reaction, and presence over performance. When a man stops trying to guess, to chase, to prove, and instead learns to observe, to stay calm and to remain grounded, he becomes something more powerful than someone who's noticed, that he becomes someone who's remembered not because he tried too hard, but because he never lost himself while trying to be chosen. Thank you for staying until the end if this message resonated with you. Share your experiences in the comments below. What have you seen in your own relationships? How have these unspoken dynamics shown up in your journey? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you're interested in learning more about human behavior, emotional intelligence, and the deeper psychology of connection, then subscribe to the channel. There's so much more ahead, and your voice is part of the journey.